This is episode 353 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Wally, the most interesting story of the week, yet again, COVID-related, as is typically the case these days. In this particular instance, we know the virus continues to spread throughout New Mexico. It is also spreading in our fair neighbor state of Colorado. The difference is in political leadership. And this case isn't about a conservative Republican versus our left-wing, hardcore progressive, so to speak, Democrat. It's hard, authoritarian even governor. But difference is Jared Polis, the progressive governor of Colorado, said publicly that he is not going to reimpose a statewide mask mandate as we have in New Mexico. And he specifically referenced New Mexico and our out-of-control case numbers as justification for his choosing not to do that. Crazy stuff here, Wally.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. Yes. So this is not a red state, blue state thing. This is various shades of Democratic leadership. And, we've seen Colorado take very much moderate positions when it comes to life in general, much more business friendly than New Mexico. And then on this, you just have to wonder, is this political on the part of the governor? What does he really believe? What does anyone really believe? There's a whole host of challenges about what the science and data is. And if you notice, Paul, no one even refers to science and data anymore. They're just like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that because that's the right thing to do. And in New Mexico, we're kind of standing increasingly alone with regard to the mask mandate.
Well, they address science, but they don't really actually look at science. And the mask is a perfect example because there's a gaping maw of a hole between the lab-tested, dummy-fitted mask that you put on.
The mask test dummy.
Yes, N95, properly fitted, in a study lab somewhere, versus the real world cloth mask. People may be wearing them, maybe not wearing them, and just the kids, of course, wearing them in classrooms.
Well, and my favorite, the under the nose approach to wearing the mask.
Right, because masks are really uncomfortable to wear for a long period of time every single day, whether you're an adult or a kid. And I'll read from a few facts of today's Albuquerque Journal, Tuesday, November the 16th, when it came to Polis's comments. Lujan Grisham's spokesperson called them disappointing and cited studies showing that wearing a mask, especially a surgical mask, reduces the spread of COVID-19. Now, again, these are studies done in labs. If you look at the real world and you look at the evolution of COVID-19, we've had a mask mandate in place since early August, Wally? Maybe late July. I mean, we had like a month and a half of no masks in New Mexico, and that quickly went away. You see that now we are at very similar levels of viral outbreak right now, as opposed to where we were this time last November when the governor shut down the state and people were standing outside to go into grocery stores to do shopping for Thanksgiving. State of New Mexico, this is again part of the article from the Journal. Health spokesperson said that the mask mandate has saved lives. Again, no evidence for that. New Mexico's 21st in COVID deaths. You could argue that vaccines and even vaccine mandates maybe have saved some lives, although Journal's numbers, 22 deaths just in yesterday's data dump. So it's not exactly promising out there. And they continue to assert, although without great evidence, that these mask mandates are doing amazing things. And my money's on Jared Polis being right, not only because Colorado's economy is so much stronger and better than New Mexico, but when it comes to the virus itself, Colorado has done much better than the state of New Mexico. I'll pull up that data. Deaths per capita, again, we are 21st in the United States, right here in New Mexico. Actually, we moved up to 20th. I apologize. And Colorado remains 43rd in deaths per capita. Now, again, the virus is spreading. There's all kinds of issues. Yes, obesity makes a difference. Ethnicity seems to make a difference. But masks do not seem to make much of a difference at all. And nobody has ever shown a real world chart of COVID spread or lack of spread, and how that mask, especially the cloth ones that people actually wear, is working.
Yeah, no doubt about it, but it gives us something to talk about, and there's real action and political action. And so as cases go forward, and, we're seeing nationally and internationally some extremely concerning statistics with regard to the effectiveness of the vaccines and what that means. And so there's not a whole lot, I don't think, that can be done on that. So it's like, what are we doing? We're doing everything we can. We have a mask mandate. I don't know. Doesn't, as you say, in the real world, it doesn't seem to be a very big difference. And, just reports from abroad, Colorado, when you're in Colorado, it's a way different atmosphere than New Mexico, always has been during the pandemic. I've been there several times. And when you go to places like Florida, not that they don't have COVID, and COVID, it goes up and then it goes down everywhere it does. But in places like Florida, you have to look really closely to even know that there's a pandemic on when you see what's going on, just in the malls, the shops out on the street compared to a place like New Mexico.
Yeah, things were fairly serious in Florida a few months ago. That's when their wave hits. Things in New Mexico last year, right at this time. I mean, this is unbelievable. World O-meters, again, COVID tracking, November the 15th, 2020. The 7-day moving average of COVID daily new cases, 1,331. That was back in November. We were much more locked down than we are now, but similar pattern. 7-day moving average, November 15th, 2021, 1,383. It just is almost a mirror image. Now, the real question is, I suppose, will we go up to, as of, let's see, the peak of the 7-day average in New Mexico hit around November 24th. So we can expect, I think, that the COVID situation will get worse when it comes to cases, at least. Hopefully, the death situation due to the vaccinations and all the other things that have been done is not going to be quite as bad. But it is tough to see any impact from what New Mexico did last year or is doing currently with regard to itself or other states. And our governor, though, is a absolute true believer, Wally, in the mask issue. And after yesterday, I believe that we will be in masks for the duration of the Lujan Grisham administration. I firmly believe that. I think the only question is whether we go.
That's not 2 years or whatever that, or that's 5.5 years.
Whatever,
if she's
however long she is around, I have firm belief that she will keep us in masks. That could be until the January 1 of 2023. If she loses re-election, or it could be January 1 of 2027, as far as I see. And the reason I say that is because I know, Wally, you're a very avid Morning Joe viewer on MSNBC, or as Rush Limbaugh astutely called them, MSLSD.
Yes.
But yeah, Morning Joe, Scarborough had the governor on. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think I've seen Morning Joe. If it's, I don't know, I must have seen it in a hotel room in the last 10 or 15 years, assuming it's been on that long. So
yeah, well, he had, Scarborough did, Governor Lujan Grisham on, and she was in front of the camera, presumably in some studio, at least far enough away from other people that she could be comfortable, because you don't want to have people reaching around you. I've done enough TV to know that nobody's miming around you in the background. They don't want to be on camera and distract. Nothing's worse than seeing some stray hand or some person walking behind you. The governor was somewhat socially distanced from people, but they're on national television on Joe Scarborough yesterday morning, touting all of the many benefits, sarcastically he says, of the infrastructure bill that just passed on Joe Biden's side yesterday. There was Michelle Lujan Grisham wearing an N95 mask, looking quite like a female Bane, the character, the bad guy from a Batman movie. It clearly is at a religious level for her in a way that even I may have underestimated at this, at this point. She's clearly not going to relent on the mask issue till somebody pries it out of her hands, or pries the power out of her hands, more importantly.
Well, very interesting. So, yeah, I just bought another supply of disposable masks, and so maybe my money wasn't wasted, Paul, if your prediction is accurate.
Are you going long on the masks?
I'm long on the masks. So.
All right. Well, that's probably the place to be, given that you're in New Mexico. Other states, including those governed by progressive Democrats of a more sane variety in Colorado, are not in the same boat. And I actually had, just to reinforce that point, I was at a conference in Tucson, Arizona last week, and some folks traveled down to Tucson from Colorado through New Mexico, and they spent a couple of days in Albuquerque, and they said, yeah, even relative to where they live up in the Denver area, Albuquerque is incredibly masked up, locked down, and just very, still remains lacking in its vibrancy. And they went to Old Town Albuquerque and a few other places. So firsthand experience the data as well. And I think the point that was missed a little bit by is this Polis response went live, viral around New Mexico, especially in conservative circles. But Polis also noted that he is really pushing the monoclonal antibodies, which is a treatment that has been proven to be successful for COVID-19. People who do get the virus, who are in certain risk categories, it is available to them. And Polis really said that he wants to make distributing and utilization of those, and they can be life-saving because they are targeted at the people who are most at risk of really severe ramifications from COVID-19. Now, I went online and found on the New Mexico Department of Health website, and I posted it at Errors of Enchantment. So if you know somebody who is at risk potentially of serious consequences from COVID-19, I urge you to check that website and go get them potentially that life-saving treatment. But
and it's been there for a long time.
Absolutely.
On the New Mexico Department of Health.
Yeah.
I can remember months and months ago. And yeah, it's just, it's interesting. It's all vaccines. It's vaccines and ventilators and not a whole lot in between. And yeah, the monoclonal antibodies. I know there's a new Pfizer pill out there. We can't even say the names of certain other drugs that people like, or the social media feeds that we're on will take us off. But yeah, there are things out there. And Paul, we're seeing in place after place now that maybe just because you've had double vaccinations, that's not enough. You may need triple. And we're starting to see outbreaks in places that are extremely high levels of vaccinations in the 90% and above, and they still have an issue. So the COVID war is not won, no doubt about that.
Yeah, and I was just going to note that Governor Lujan Grisham, and there are articles in the Albuquerque Journal addressing and referencing these treatments, but I cannot think of a single time when our governor or any of her spokespeople, including, of course, David Scrace, talked about the monoclonal antibody treatment as a way to save people's lives with regard to COVID-19. And it's if you've gotten it, this is what to do. And it strikes me, one of the oldest political or social forces in the United States, typically associated with more of the Republican conservative side, is Puritanism. The idea that someone somewhere is having fun. Now, obviously, that is not exactly what we're talking about here.
The modern social media version is FOMO, fear of missing out, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And it's also the idea that somehow getting COVID is a moral failing on the part of the person who gets COVID. And I do believe that not only our governor, but many, many on the left have that view that if you get COVID, unless you are one of the mask and vaccine evangelists, that you are failing morally. It's like Aaron Rodgers, I guess, not to go too off the rails here, but Aaron Rodgers, for those who don't know, is an NFL quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. He came down with COVID after playing footsie with the idea of whether he was vaccinated or not. Turns out he was not.
Is he or isn't he?
And, there was outrage and remains outrage among figures on the left. Ben Roethlisberger of the Steelers, my favorite NFL team, by the way, missed this week's game because he was vaccinated and still came down with the COVID. Nobody said a peep about him. And it's just the idea that you're going to criticize and berate somebody who made a different health decision. This is unique, though. I think this kind of puritanical approach to health is something that we really haven't seen, certainly in such a widespread way. I've never heard one political group talking about obesity as something that, you shouldn't be treated. This is just a moral failing on their part. Even motorcyclists that don't wear helmets, even AIDS patients. These are major health issues that involve some moral decisions on people, and we've never, as a society, judged folks for succumbing to those issues. Even in Albuquerque, of course, gunshot wounds. We know that there's a lot of people who do a lot of dumb things with guns, whether they're criminals or not. It just, we've never had this kind of moralistic judging. And I think our governor, quite frankly, is playing into that with her desire to push one specific health approach as opposed to others, including monoclonal antibodies.
Yeah, and as I say, if the trend around the country and around the world is any indication, people who have 2 and then 3 vaccinations and wear masks every minute of their lives are still at a very high risk over what is turning into the long term of COVID, of catching the disease. And we'll have to see whether that policy or at least that political approach is adjusted. But yeah, you're right. It's there's COVID shaming, I guess we would call it.
Definitely.
So, yep.
All right. Well, New Mexico's unemployment rate during COVID has not recovered very well. We've talked about this, and we've been in COVID for long enough that there is truly nothing new under the sun when it comes to COVID. But we know that New Mexico has long struggled with high unemployment rates. Channel 13 shared a recent Wallet Hub report. I've shared it on airsoфenchantment.com. We've talked about the Wallet Hub reports, but it's good to recognize and understand that New Mexico continues to lag economically across the entire country, in large part due to the governor's COVID lockdown policies, but certainly due to everything else going on the way our state is managed. We certainly have plenty of oil and gas revenue, but that doesn't translate into necessarily jobs and economic prosperity if our politicians do the wrong things. And according to Wallet Hub, we have had the biggest increase, or we're 48th in terms of among the highest increases in unemployment in the entire country. The only states, and I use that advisedly, states with higher increases in unemployment, remember New Mexico's already elevated going into COVID relative to other states, Delaware and Rhode Island, and of course Washington, District of Columbia up there as well. Shockingly, I know that this is going to wow and amaze you. What is the state with the smallest increase in unemployment since COVID? Think of...
I'm going to say Utah.
No, Florida.
Oh,
Florida,
okay.
yes.
Very good.
Old Ron DeSantis, that evil man himself has, and I don't know, according to Wallet Hub, they don't break it down. I could easily see this being a actual move in a positive direction for Florida at this point in terms of their unemployment and the jobs created. But Florida is definitely a state that's done the opposite of New Mexico on COVID policy and lockdowns, and it's not a surprise that Florida is also number one in terms of the least jobs lost or most jobs created since way back when COVID initially broke out. And it was nice enough of Channel 13 to come calling and talk about that. And again, you can find that at airsofenchantment.com. Little Forbes article, Wally. We know New Mexico's education system is no bueno, as they say. And Forbes just reinforced that with its ranking of 51st. So that one we get the real shot of reality when you wind up at 51.
Wow, just let that wash over. That is very disappointing.
Yeah, it's not surprising, but it is disappointing. I'll read word for word what Forbes has to say. They refer to the economy, oil and gas, and the labs, but then they note that New Mexico ranks in the bottom 6 overall for a 6th straight year, largely to a weak labor supply, lousy current economic climate. Income and job growth have been anemic over the past 5 years. The state fares poorly on quality of life metrics, a product of comparatively low school test scores and high crime. So, this is just the latest indicator that education remains a ripe issue for reformers in New Mexico. Desperately needed reform to happen in New Mexico. And, one of the things that should be, as rightly folks who responded to the Albuquerque Journal's poll pointed out, education was basically 2-to-1 a bigger concern than either COVID or climate change in that journal poll. And it's right that is the case. Unfortunately, we have elected politicians who are completely incapable and uninterested, both in the legislature and in the governor's office, although finally got some folks in the school board, at least here locally, who will, I think, push in the right direction. Education problem is not going to be solved by the current political establishment in the state of New Mexico, Wally.
Yeah, and we do have big problems in education, and we'll probably talk about this more in the future if we get a chance. But New Mexico has a strategic 20-year economic plan. And one of the things I was just perusing that is they talked about there's a mismatch between education and what's wanted by the private sector. And, that's some mental gymnastics at a minimum, so is there a mismatch in what's being taught? I certainly wouldn't doubt that, not for a minute. But by the same token, if overall educational achievement is very, very low, low is never a good match for jobs in the private sector from an education point of view. So,
Yeah, as a parent of children who are in school, including one in a charter school, which is a public school, it's intensely frustrating. But hopefully, the first signs of life came with the school board election here in Albuquerque. But that doesn't get reform done, whether you're talking here in Albuquerque or certainly across the state. There are big changes that need to happen, and the unions need to lose their grip on power in the state before we see long-term change in a positive direction in education. Wally, I know you and I talk utilities on a very regular basis. I opened the Albuquerque Journal on Sunday morning, and it was a feeling that was just a little bit like Christmas morning there when I pulled open the paper and saw John Trevor's cartoon there, and it's as if maybe Trevor's listening to our podcast.
yeah, it is. And he has a way of doing that. Trevor gets on issues that are important and encapsulates them in 1, 2, or 3 panels like nobody else. So.
Yep. So we'll go through this. I'm going to play character 1. Are you able to pull this up on your screen? Go to heirsofenchantment.com.
All right.
And it's the Trever cartoon roasting P&M and its merger. One guy at a bar says, "Well, here's to that P&M Avangrid merger getting approved."
Oh, what?
Because then we'll be able to get to 100% solar and wind energy on the grid that much sooner. And then the bartender standing there says, "Who's that?" Or no, the guy. This is the guy.
Yeah, who's that? Who's talking?
Yeah, and the bartender says, "Back up, home generator salesman." And boy, yeah, because he's not hearing. Trevor is certainly not hearing this on the mainstream media's outlets. He's probably getting this information from yours truly. So if you're out there, John, hello, and excellent cartoon. Definitely one of your very, very bests. And thanks for the listen. And the only thing I would add is that it's not really the P&M Avangrid merger that's going to destabilize our electrical grid. It's really the decisions made, including that one, that are coming as a result of the Energy Transition Act, the New Mexico Green New Deal passed in 2019.
Yeah, absolutely. And without the Energy Transition Act, there probably wouldn't be an Avangrid P&M merger,
Exactly.
even on the. And so, Paul, here's my new hashtag: generator time ? So you and I have been talking about this for a lot longer than we've discussed it on the podcast about the pros and cons and types of generator that may be necessary in this coming energy world that we're facing.
Yeah, that's what all the cool kids are asking for Christmas this year is a generator. Now, Wally, we haven't really gone into detail on this in terms of the agenda, but it was in the morning paper. The PRC examiner, a different examiner, by the way, than the one that essentially cast some bad light, if you will, cast aspersions on the merger, the P&M Avangrid merger. A different PRC examiner has backed the P&M coal plant pullout. This, of course, is the Four Corners generating station. This is the non-San Juan generating station. That one's going to close this summer unless something drastic happens. This one, I believe it's on Navajo land or very adjacent.
No, I believe it is on the nation. That's my understanding.
And
so
it's going to revert to control of a Navajo-owned company called Intech in 2024 at the end of that year. And basically, the gist of it is that this examiner said that, yes, it's a good move for all involved for that to, in fact, happen. Now, Wally, before I hand it over to you for comment, the Navajo, like I said, they want to keep this thing open, and the environmental groups, well, I will say that some of the environmentalists seem to be overall happy with this move, but Marion Nasi, the kind of the hardest of hardcore radicals, and sometimes the radicals are right on things, but this case is not one of them, I don't believe. Her of the new energy economy, she wants that plant shut down. She does not want the Navajo taking control over that plant and using it to generate electricity for the grid. So what say you, Wally?
Well, yeah, the whole issue that the enviros have is that they hate coal. They want it gone. The sooner the better. And so, to have a publicly traded utility, PNM, to get out of coal, they're willing to give them stranded cost recovery and charge their ratepayers. So there's no free lunch. Make no mistake, the undepreciated value that PNM has in that plant would be charged to the customers. But wait, maybe the plant doesn't shut down. And so if you look at it from a macro environmental point of view, is anything really been accomplished? Having one entity now own it as opposed to another. But this strikes me as this is really the rubric, the model for what's happening in the country and the world, is that if there are no coal-fired power plants in the United States and they still continue to add them in huge numbers in places like China and India, what have we really accomplished from a carbon dioxide emissions point of view anyway? So yeah, it's kind of a miniature version of that issue that the whole world is working on. And, I know it's a little bit beyond the scope, but was it the COP26 meeting late in the game? It looked like they were going to get the Chinese and the folks from India to say no more coal-fired power plants. At the last minute, they're like, no, we're not going to say that. So, just because you say it, even if somebody were to say it, doesn't mean it's necessarily true. One of the issues we've seen with these environmental things over the years is like the Paris Climate Accords that the U.S. did not sign on to. We did really well on them, by the way, whereas a lot of the countries that were signing up for them did very poorly. So there's a lot of smoke and mirrors and smoke maybe from coal-fired power plants in the energy markets, and it's coming right here to New Mexico as well.
Yeah, well, long story short, I hope that the Navajo are able to keep that plant going, because that will lend to grid stability as we enter a very uncertain period in terms of just the Western power grid and the stability of our own electrical needs here in New Mexico. And having that available will be very helpful. We're already on track to either completely eliminate the San Juan generating station or go to carbon sequestration on that. And so if that happens, I feel like New Mexico's already doing its part here. Certainly I'd love to see somebody like the governor push for nuclear power and move in that direction. Instead, we're on the way out of nuclear as well.
Yeah, and Paul, the shutting down part of power plants in the transition element of the Energy Transition Act is it's easy. It's easy to shut something down. In these times of tough supply chains, big changes, questionable technology, whether it's up to the challenge, particularly batteries and what role they'll play, the building of new natural gas fired generation and all the like. There's a lot of complexity here, and the early results from around the world in this portion of the process that we're here in New Mexico is the next few years, we could be in for some trouble. We'll have to see. But when people like the vice president of generation at Public Service Company New Mexico tells the commission we could have problems, you probably ought to listen to him.
Yeah, and final topic. Of course, Friday was the meeting in the public education department on the new social studies standards that are laden with critical race theory concepts. A lot of the media coverage just wants to say, oh, this is, kind of an effort to teach things that aren't so great about America and balance out traditional curriculum. It's heavy on micromanaging the way teachers teach. It's heavy on divisive concepts. It is not maybe whole cloth CRT, but it is certainly part and parcel with the approach of CRT when it comes to sowing, not just skepticism, but sowing discontent about America, American history, and all kinds of things. And it was an interesting hearing. I was on for a marathon 4 hours of Zoom. It was magnificent on a Friday afternoon. No better way to pass a Friday afternoon. And I commented in live person, as well as we offered several comments on other PED rules that were coming through in this particular meeting. But thanks to everybody out there who took the time to offer commentary on the issues that really matter here. And I don't know that we're going to affect the governor and her approach, but this is a winning issue for conservatives. Parents of all races and backgrounds do not want to see this propaganda make its way into the classroom, this divisive propaganda, and hopefully this at least started to raise awareness, even if the media is trying to downplay the influence that CRT and its concepts are having in New Mexico classrooms. So thanks again.
Yeah, very good. And, 4 hours, congratulations, you're still here. Your head did not explode. Sometimes when I attend that many hours of public hearings, it's a tough one. So,
yeah. All right. Well, thank you for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to this show at Apple, Stitcher, or have your Google Home play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.